Namaste and welcome to Daily News Simplified, the what, why, and how of newspaper reading. Now, we would be analyzing the Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper of 25th of June 2019, and the news that would be covered today is given on the screen, and the timestamp for the same is given in the description and the comment section given below. And so, now with this, let us start with the first article. Now, we have taken this opinion based editorial from the editorial page on page 10. Now, this editorial talks about the evolving news about the rising tensions between Iran and the United States, whereby these rising tensions between Iran and the United States can lead to a war between both the countries. Now, we had covered about the rising US-Iran tensions in the Daily News Simplified video of 20th of June. And one of the aspects which was said is that this tensions between Iran and the United States is currently a news in transition, and therefore today's editorial should also be seen as a continued transition on the news on the US-Iran conflict. Now, the main crux of the author in today's editorial is that both US and Iran do not want to raise tensions to the level that it would lead to war. However, what is also happening is that both the countries, US and Iran, also do not want to be the first country to stop the rising tensions, whereby both the countries do not want to be the first country to offer a truce or offer a peaceful resolution to the other side. Now, the main reason for this is that both the countries do not want to be seen weak in front of the world and in front of their domestic audience. Now, the focus of today's editorial is very similar to the focus of the editorial of Daily News Simplified video of 20th of June, whereby within the earlier editorial also the author had claimed that both the United States and Iran are engaging in a game of chicken, whereby both Iran and the United States are willing to escalate the tensions between both the countries, which may lead further to war, and are not willing to back down as they do not want to be seen weak in front of their domestic audience and in front of the world. Now, within this regard, the first aspect which the author highlights is what would be the potential impact of war, especially on Saudi Arabia and Israel. Now, the containment of Iran has been the main aim of the Saudi-led Arab alliance and also of Israel. However, according to the author, these countries, Saudi Arabia and Israel, would actually be negatively affected if the United States does declare a war on Iran. Now, according to the author, in a war between the United States and Iran, it would be the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and Israel that would be the prime targets for Iranian attacks. Now, according to the author, it would be very difficult for Saudi Arabia and UAE to defend themselves against the Iranian attacks, especially on their oil supplies through the Strait of Hormuz and the Persian Gulf. Apart from this, what the author has also highlighted is that if the country of Israel enters into a war against Iran, then there is a strong possibility that the Muslim, especially within the Arab world, would become sympathetic towards Iran in the war. Apart from this, what the author has also highlighted is that Iran has a strong and effective proxy network across the Middle East, whereby Iran has fighters in the form of Houthis within the country of Yemen, the terrorist organization Hezbollah, which is currently involved within the country of Lebanon, fighters within Iraq and Syria, and according to the author, currently such Iranian fighters are not directly involved within the country of Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. However, according to the author, if there is a war between the United States and Iran, then these proxy fighters of Iran would have the moral and financial backing of Iran of directly spreading and attacking the country of Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. Now, as we have already seen within the country of Yemen, within the Kashmir itself, or within Palestine, if there is a state-sponsored proxy war through terrorist organization and through small guerrilla warfare, it becomes very difficult for a country to continuously defeat these proxy fighters, whereby Saudi Arabia has been unable to defeat the proxy fighters within the country of Yemen. Similarly, Israel has been unable to defeat the proxy fighters of Hezbollah within Palestine. And similarly, India is also finding it difficult to defeat the proxy war of Pakistan within the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Now, the fourth and the last point is that if there is a war between the United States and Iran, then it may again lead to a rise of ISIS within the Middle East. Now, Iran was one of the leading countries which had sent troops and financed the fight against ISIS within Syria and Iraq. However, if there is a war against Iran by the United States, then it would weaken the country of Iran in their ability to fight the rise of ISIS within Syria and Iraq again, whereby neither Iran, United States, Saudi Arabia or Israel want the rise of ISIS within Iraq or of Syria. However, the US-Iran war has the potential of again leading to a rise of ISIS within Iraq and Syria. Now, these are the four potential impacts on Saudi Arabia and Israel that might be caused if there is a war between the United States and Iran. Now, apart from this, what the authors also highlighted is that there have been various signs which have shown that both the United States and Iran do not want a war. Whereby what had happened recently is that Iran shot down a US drone which was flying over the country of Iran. However, what happened soon afterwards is that the Donald Trump administration did not retaliate by bombing the country of Iran. Whereby what this shows is that the United States under Donald Trump showed some form of restraint by not being provoked by Iran for shooting down their drone. However, you also have to understand that this news is currently evolving, whereby the United States may retaliate against Iran for shooting down their drone in the coming future. Apart from this, what is also happening is that the country of Iran is in negotiations with the allies of the United States, such as France, Germany, India, and others, whereby Iran wants the allies or the countries which are friendly with the United States to convince the Donald Trump administration to decrease the amount of sanctions which has been imposed on Iran. And if United States does decrease the amount of sanctions that are imposed on Iran, then Iran is willing to negotiate with regards to the demands of the United States. However, you have to understand that this is a currently evolving news, whereby what has happened today might change tomorrow. And let us wait and see on how the tensions between Iran and the United States develop further. Now, as we have already understood before, the tensions between Iran and the United States should be seen from the perspective of GS Paper 2 within the section International Relations and within the subsection Effect of International Politics, wherein the international politics being discussed is of the Iran-US tensions. However, it is yet to be seen as to what effect it would have on India's interest. And so now with this, let us move on to the next article. Now we have taken this article from page 1. Now, as you already might be aware of, India is currently in negotiations to form a free trade agreement known as RCEP, or the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, whereby India is in negotiation to form this free trade agreement with the ASEAN countries plus China, Japan, South Korea, Australia, and New Zealand. Now, before understanding as to what this article talks about, you first need to understand as to what is RCEP, or the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. Now, RCEP is basically a proposed free trade agreement among 16 countries, whereby it includes the 10 countries which are member of ASEAN, which are Brunei, Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos, Malaysia, Myanmar, Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam. Whereby if you take a look at this map, all of these countries are basically Southeast Asian countries, which form the Association of the Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN. Now, ASEAN currently has a mechanism known as ASEAN Plus One, whereby under this, it includes the 10 member countries of ASEAN, and the Plus One is one individual neighboring country of ASEAN with whom ASEAN has signed a free trade agreement. Now, RCEP has signed an individual free trade agreement with almost all of its neighboring countries, whereby they have signed a free trade agreement with Australia, China, India, Japan, South Korea, and with New Zealand. And as you can see from this map, they're all neighboring countries of ASEAN. Now, this particular format of ASEAN Plus One has led to what is called the ASEAN Plus 6 format, whereby under ASEAN Plus One, ASEAN used to sign an individual free trade agreement with one individual neighboring country. But under ASEAN Plus 6, a free trade agreement is being negotiated between the 10 member countries of ASEAN and the 6 FTA partners of ASEAN. Whereby one of the USP of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Free Trade Agreement is that it would combine the region of South Asia by having India as a member, also combine the region of East Asia by having China, South Korea, and Japan as members. Similarly, all the individual countries of Southeast Asia would be part of this free trade agreement. And apart from this, specific countries such as Australia and New Zealand would also be a part of this free trade agreement. And therefore, as you can see from this map, the RCEP free trade agreement would be focused upon the Asia Pacific region. So now hopefully up till here you've understood as to what is RCEP. Now, apart from this, what you should also know is what has been India's position with regards to RCEP. Now, in simplest of terms, India wants a liberalization or the opening up of the services sector from other ASEAN member countries. Now, as you already might be aware of, India is one of the strongest countries within Asia within the services sector, such as financial services, IT-enabled services, banking services, educational services, especially within the English language, apart from other fields. And it is within that context that India wants the RCEP countries to open up their services market. However, within that context, India is also reluctant to liberalize its own manufacturing sector. Now, as you already might be aware of, China, Vietnam, and other member countries of RCEP currently have a stronghold with regards to manufacturing of cheap goods. And similarly, countries such as South Korea and Japan currently have a stronghold with regards to manufacturing of high-tech goods. Therefore, there is a fear in India that if India opens up its market for manufactured goods, then it would be flooded by cheap products from China and Vietnam and high-tech products from South Korea and Japan. And it is within that context that India is reluctant or does not want to open up its manufacturing sector to other RCEP member countries. Now, it is within that context that we come to today's article. Now, what is currently happening is that the ASEAN member countries or the ASEAN organization wants to conclude the RCEP agreement within this year. However, what is currently happening is that India still has concerns with regards to the RCEP agreement. Now, apart from India having concerns with regards to opening up the manufacturing sector, India also has minor concerns with regards to intellectual property rights, the conduct of e-commerce, and similarly other minor concerns that have to be completely negotiated between India and other RCEP members. And therefore, it is within that context, because India's concerns with regards to RCEP still exist and have yet to be completely negotiated with other RCEP member countries, it has led to a question as to whether India is finally going to join RCEP or not. And it is within that context that the central government or the government of India has said that it is still premature to consider that India is not going to join the RCEP agreement. And therefore, you have to understand that this news shall be considered as news in transition. Whereby let us wait and see on how the new government that has been elected within India goes forward with regards to negotiations for the RCEP agreement. Now, one of the options that has been put forward is that ASEAN and the other 5 countries can sign the RCEP free trade agreement. Whereby what can happen is that India can continue to negotiate with the RCEP member countries and join the free trade agreement when its concerns has been resolved. Now, even within this context, you have to understand that this news is still in transition, and let us wait and see as to what decision the government of India takes later this year. But hopefully up till here you've understood as to what is the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. Now, question has already been asked in the prelims examination of 2018, which had asked which of the above countries are among the free trade partners of ASEAN, whereby the countries that were given are Australia, Canada, China, India, Japan, and the United States. And as you already understand, the correct answer to this question would be C, whereby Australia, China, India, and Japan are the correct FTA partners of ASEAN. Now, the older students who have been following the Daily News Simplified, and also those students which had seen the discussion videos on DNS on the questions that were asked in the prelims examination of 2018, would have known that the FTA partners of ASEAN was covered in the Daily News Simplified video of 23rd of January. Whereby this question within your prelims examination was asked because an important current event had occurred, whereby the first RCEP summit was held in 2017. Whereby the international importance of the first RCEP summit was that it was going to include the FTA partners of ASEAN to form the largest free trade agreement within Asia itself. And it is within that context that the question as to who are the free trade partners of ASEAN was asked in the prelims examination of 2018. Now, this article becomes important for your GS paper 2 within the section International Relations and within the subsection Regional Groupings and Agreements involving India and affecting India's interest. And so now with this, let us move on to the next article. Now, we have taken this article from page 15. Now, this article talks about the politics between the United States and China with regards to the ongoing technology wars. And therefore, this article and the upcoming explanation should be seen from the perspective of GS Paper 2 within the section International Relations, Effect of Politics of Developed and Developing Countries on India's Interest. Now, what has happened is that most of you would be aware of a company called Huawei, whereby this company Huawei manufactures one of the most popular mobile phones within India. And apart from this, various telecom companies within India use the equipments that have been supplied by the company Huawei. Now, what has happened? Now, what had initially happened was that the Obama administration in 2012 had blacklisted Huawei from supplying sensitive equipments to various US government agencies. And similarly, a law was again passed in 2018, which prohibited the government services and government departments of the United States from purchasing telecommunication equipment or undertaking telecommunication services from the company Huawei. And what has happened most recently was that the Donald Trump administration in 2019 prohibited the transactions that any US company can undertake with the company Huawei. Whereby under this 2019 notification of the Donald Trump administration, it has forced US companies and individuals within the United States to receive a license from the US government, only after which they can conduct a trade with the company Huawei. Now this license has to be given by the Donald Trump administration of the United States, so it basically cuts off the company Huawei from the US market. So now hopefully up till you have understood as to what has happened between the United States and the Chinese company Huawei. Now there are two main reasons as to why these actions have been undertaken by the United States. Now the first reason, which has been given by the United States itself, is that according to the US administration, there are various security concerns with regards to the Chinese company Huawei. Whereby what has happened is that the United States administration, starting from Barack Obama in 2012, has said that the Chinese government and the Chinese People's Liberation Army is using the Huawei equipments to spy on its users. Apart from this, what the US administration has also said is that the particular person who has built up and is currently the CEO of Huawei has strong links with the Chinese Communist Party. And therefore, according to the US administration, the telecom and the ICT equipments which has been built by Huawei can be used for spying by the Chinese government. However, the main reason as to why the United States is taking such actions against the company Huawei is that there is a weakness of US companies who are not able to compete against the company Huawei. Now what you need to know is that there has been an increase in the exports of the United States with regards to ICT and telecom equipment. However, what has been seen is that there has been a decrease in the percentage of US exports of telecom equipments in the global trade share. So let's say for an example that in 2012, the US telecom companies were able to export around $10 billion worth of good. However, by 2019, this value has increased to 20 billion. And therefore, what is being seen is that the export of telecom equipments by US company has actually increased. But apart from this, what has happened is that in 2012, the share of the US companies with regards to export of telecom equipments might have been around 30%. However, what has happened is that by 2019, the share in global trade has decreased to 20%. Whereby what has happened now is that the company Huawei currently has the highest share in the global cellular market, whereby they currently control 28% of the global market. Whereby apart from this, the company Huawei has also overtaken Apple mobile manufacturer. Apart from this, what used to happen earlier was that there were several countries and regions which were dominated by the US companies, such as the countries of Latin America. However, what has happened now is that the countries and regions which were earlier dominated by US companies has now been overtaken by the company Huawei. Now these were the main reasons as to why restrictions were imposed by the US government on the company Huawei, since the US companies themselves were unable to compete with the company Huawei. Now the United States is still one of the most valuable markets with regards to telecom equipments. And thereby when the United States government imposed restrictions on the company Huawei, it allowed safeguards for the US companies to continue with their established dominance within the US markets and not have to compete with the cheaper and better imports from the company Huawei. Now, one of the main reasons as to why the Donald Trump administration has put up more severe restrictions, especially within the private sector, with regards to conducting trade with Huawei, is to safeguard the US market and the US companies with regards to the 5G technology. Now, Huawei is the leading company within the world which is providing the ICT and the telecom infrastructure for launching 5G to countries across the world. And what is being seen is that the US companies will not be able to compete with the company Huawei with regards to technology infrastructure for 5G technology. Whereby it is not only just about price, the Huawei company has better technology as compared to the US company with regards to 5G technology infrastructure. And therefore the US companies would not be able to compete with Huawei either in terms of pricing or either in terms of technology. And it is therefore within that regard that the Donald Trump administration has decided to safeguard the US market for the US companies. However, apart from this, what is also happening is that the United States is pressuring other countries to also not allow Huawei with either regards to field trials or forming the technology infrastructure for 5G technology. Whereby what has happened is that the United Kingdom, Australia, New Zealand, and several other countries have agreed to this US demand. However, apart from this, the United States is also pressuring India to not allow Huawei company to participate in the 5G trials within India. Now, what is happening is that in September of 2018, India had allowed Huawei, along with Ericsson, Nokia, Samsung, and Cisco, to conduct 5G trials within India. However, what happened in February of 2019 is that the Telecom Secretary of India has said that government is yet to take a decision whether they would allow the Chinese company Huawei to participate within the 5G trial or not. Therefore, currently there is some sort of ambiguity, or it is not clear whether Huawei would be participating in the 5G trials in India or whether it would not be. And it is within that context that we come to today's article, whereby the Huawei company has said that it will follow all the security norms which would be given out by India if they are allowed to participate in the 5G trials. Whereby the telecom companies within India itself have said that they want Huawei to participate in the 5G trials because the company Huawei produces the cheapest telecom equipment that is required by the Indian telecom companies. However, let us wait and see as to whether the government of India is going to allow the Huawei company to participate within the 5G trials within India. Now, before moving on to the next article, you should also know that this news is also in transition. So let us wait and see as to what would be the decision of government of India and how the technology war between United States and China moves forward. And so now with this, let us move on to the next article. Now we have taken this article from page 1. Now what this article talks about is of a recent lynching case which has happened in the state of Jharkhand. Now the news in itself is not important with regards to a UPSC examination. However, what is required for you to understand is how can we stop mob lynching and mob violence within India. Now, the Supreme Court of India, in the Tehseen S. Poonawalla case in July of 2018, gave out various directions on how public lynching and mob violence can be stopped within India. Now, methods to stop mob violence and public lynching was comprehensively covered in the Daily News Simplified video of 4th of August. And it was covered with regards to the observation given out by the Supreme Court in the Tehseen S. Poonawalla case. Now, what I'll do is add this section from the Daily News Simplified video of 4th of August in today's TNS video. And therefore, we can again revise as to what was the observations of the Supreme Court in Tehseen S. Poonawalla case and how can mob violence and public lynching can be stopped within India. Now, the upcoming explanation with regards to mob violence should be seen from the perspective of GS Paper 3 within the section Security and within the subsection Challenges to Internal Security through Communication Networks, Role of Media and Social Networking Sites in Internal Security Challenges. Now, a question has been asked in the mains examination of 2017. Which had asked, mob violence is emerging as a serious law and order problem within India. By giving suitable examples, analyze the causes and consequences of such violence. And it is within that regard that we're going to understand the causes and consequences with regards to public lynching. Now, lynching is a form of violence in which a mob, under the pretext of administrating justice, executes a presumed offender. Now, whenever you're writing an answer in mains examination on a question on public lynching, always remember that the reason given by the mob for a particular mob lynching is for administrating justice. However, another perspective for the reason for public lynching is identity politics, in which a particular group or community intends to establish dominance and portray power over another group or another community. So it has been considered that the main reason for public lynching stems from identity politics. So wherein, for an example that is also given in the article, that lynching in form of public hangings was also practiced in the United States. So what would happen is a mob of white individuals indulged in the lynching of black men. Now the main reason given by the white individuals for lynching of black men was that they were administrating justice. So if whenever a black person was accused of sexual harassment of a white woman, hurting a white person, a mob of white individuals would execute that black person by publicly hanging him, and they would give the reason that they were administrating justice against the black person. However, the actual reason for the public lynching of black person was of identity politics, in which the white group or the white community in the United States intended to establish their dominance and portray their power over the black group or the black community. So, with regards to public lynching, you have to differentiate between the reason given by the mob and the actual reason of mob justice versus identity politics. So now hopefully you have understood as to what is public lynching. Now let us understand as to what has been the observation of the Supreme Court. Now the first main observation that was given by the Supreme Court is to make public lynching a separate offence. Now the Supreme Court in a three-judge bench had told the Parliament to make lynching a separate offence. And apart from this, the Supreme Court also told the Parliament to provide adequate punishment for lynching. Now, the main reason given by the Supreme Court for making public lynching a separate offence is that a special law in this field would instill a sense of fear among the people who involve themselves in public lynching or any form of such activities. And the reason to provide punishment for lynching is because the current laws that are available in India generally prosecute individual violence. But public lynching is a form of collective violence in which a group of people involve themselves in conducting a public lynching, wherein there are different aspects to mob lynching, such as the sharing of hateful information, the actual killing of a particular person, and these different aspects of mob lynching are currently prosecuted based on individual violence. And what is required is to prosecute public lynching or mob lynching as a form of collective violence. And this is the reason the Supreme Court has asked the Parliament to provide adequate punishment for public lynching. And apart from this, the Supreme Court has also observed that authorities which are conferred with the responsibility to maintain law and order have the main obligation to see that public lynching or any form of public vigilantism does not take place. Now you have to understand the context in which it is said, because public order and police are within the state list under the 7th schedule of the Constitution of India, and therefore the principal obligation against public lynching fall upon the state government, wherein under the Constitution of India it is the responsibility of the states to maintain law and order. So now hopefully you have understood the main observations that have been given by the Supreme Court on separate offence, separate punishment and law and order. Now let us understand the measures that have been proposed by the Supreme Court that are required to be undertaken by the Government of India. Now the first step that would be undertaken by the state government is that they will have to designate a senior police officer as a nodal officer, and this nodal officer would be designated in each district of that state. Now the main duty of the nodal officer would be to take measures to prevent incidents of mob violence and lynching within their district. And apart from this, the nodal officer and the state government shall constitute a special task force so as to get intelligence reports about the people who are likely to commit such crimes of mob violence, such as spreading hate speeches, provocative statements, fake news, and other aspects of mob violence. Now, apart from this, the Supreme Court has also said that the central and state governments should take steps to curb forms of hate speeches in forms of messages, videos, and other materials that are available on social media platforms. And therefore, the central and the state governments have a responsibility to curb fake news that are spread on social media platforms that have a tendency to incite mob violence or public lynching. And apart from this, the Supreme Court has also said that the state governments shall prepare a lynching and a mob violence victim compensation scheme, which would provide compensation to victims of public lynching or the family of the person who has been a victim of mob violence. And apart from this, the victim and the family of the victim shall also receive free legal aid. And the state nodal authority that has been formed shall also ensure the protection of the victim. And apart from this, the Supreme Court has also said that the cases of lynching and mob violence shall also be tried in fast-track courts. And these fast-track courts which would undertake cases of lynching and mob violence shall be formed in each district. And according to the Supreme Court, these fast-track courts must award the maximum sentence in cases of mob violence and public lynching. So now hopefully you've understood the various government measures that have been proposed by the Supreme Court that requires to be undertaken by state and central government. Wherein the first main government measure that you should remember is the formation of a nodal officer. The second government measure would be the formation of a special task force. The third government measure would be the curbing of fake news on social media platforms. The fourth government measure that you should remember is the formation of a lynching or a mob violence victim compensation scheme by the state governments. The fifth government measure would be the provision of free legal aid. And the sixth and the last government measure that has been proposed by the Supreme Court is the formation of fast track courts that would undertake cases of lynching and mob violence and which would be set up in each district. So now hopefully you've understood the measures that have been proposed by the Supreme Court that are required to be undertaken by central and state governments. And so hopefully with this you have understood the various aspects with regards to public lynching in the form of the observations given out by the Supreme Court in the Tehseen Poonewala case and what measures can be undertaken so as to ensure that public lynching in India is stopped. And so now with this, let us move on to the next article. Now we have taken this article from page 4. Now what this article highlights is that the Archaeological Survey of India is carrying out restoration within the Red Fort. Now what we're going to do in this section is understand various facts about the Red Fort through the help for questions for practice. Now there are 2 questions for your practice and what you need to do is pause this video, solve both of these questions and wait for 5 seconds for the correct answer. Now the correct answer to question number 1 is D 1, 2 and 3. Whereby as you already might be aware of, the Red Fort complex is the UNESCO World Heritage Site. Apart from this, when we say the Red Fort complex, it includes the Red Fort which was built by Shah Jahan around 1500s. And similarly, it also includes the Salimgarh Fort which was built by Islam Shah Suri, whereby both of these forts are connected by a bridge. But when we say the Red Fort complex, which is part of the UNESCO World Heritage Site, it also includes the Salimgarh Fort. Apart from this Red Fort also hosted the Peacock Throne, which was removed by Nadir Shah. Now with regards to question number 2, the correct answer is D, neither 1 nor 2. Now Nahar-e-Bisht refers to the continuous water channels that are seen within the Red Fort. While with regards to statement number 2, Red Fort is not the only construction with red sandstone within Shahjahanabad. Whereby the Jama Masjid, which was constructed by Shah Jahan within Shahjahanabad itself and near to the Red Fort, was also built with red sandstone. And therefore both the statements are incorrect and the correct answer is D, neither 1 nor 2. Now there are 2 more questions for practice and what you need to do is pause this video, solve both of these questions and wait for 5 seconds for the correct answer. Now the concept for question number 3 has been taken from an article which has appeared on page number 15. Now what this article has highlighted is that the number of willful defaulters within nationalized banks within India has increased by more than 60%. Whereby from 2014-15 onwards, the number of willful defaulters have increased each year. However, what was required for you to understand from this article is who can be declared as being a willful defaulter. Now within that regard, the correct answer to question number 3 is D 1, 2 and 3. Whereby with regards to first statement, borrowers who fail to meet his dues, even if he has the ability to pay, would be declared as a willful defaulter. Similarly, borrowers who have diverted the money away that they have taken from bank from their actual purpose, then they can also be declared as being a willful defaulter. Whereby what happens sometimes is that companies end up taking a loan from Bank A. Now the loan that they might have taken from A might be with regards to construction of a property or a purchase of a property. But what this company A does is that it uses the money for any other purpose. And therefore borrowers who have diverted the money that they have borrowed from a bank from their actual intended purpose can also be declared as being willful defaulter. Similarly, borrowers who default on loan repayment and has sold the mortgage which has been kept with the bank can be declared as a willful defaulter. Now what this simply means is, let's say you have taken a loan from a bank and with regards to this you have given the guarantee of your home, your property or gold upon which you were given a loan by the bank. Now let's say you have sold that house which you have given as a guarantee to the bank and after that you have also defaulted on your loan repayment. Then based on both of these scenarios you can be declared as being a willful defaulter. Now with regards to question number 4, the correct answer is C, both 1 and 2. Whereby as we have already understood, the RCEP agreement is being negotiated by ASEAN and its 6 FTA partners, and similarly the Broad-Based Trade and Investment Agreement or BTIA is being negotiated by India and the European Union, and therefore the correct answer is C, both 1 and 2. And now with this we come to an end in the analysis of today's newspaper. Now we move on to the question for today.